It was one of those days when you probably remember where you were when you heard the news. Brian Clough passed away on the 20th of September 2004. Of all places, I was in Paris. Long before the days of easily accessible Wi-Fi, I had to make my way to an internet cafe and booked a slot there in order to update the tribute website. A few days later, I managed to get home in time for the tribute event in Nottingham's Old Market Square. And then a few weeks later was the memorial service at Pride Park, where in terrible weather I reported for the BBC.
Among the sporting figures due to pay tribute tonight is the former cricketer Jeff Boycott. Let's talk again to Marcus Alton, who is still, unfortunately, sorry about this, Marcus, outside Pride Park and in the pouring rain. Brian Clough was a big admirer of Jeff Boycott, wasn't he?
Yes, that's right. Over the years, Jeff Boycott became a good family friend, and Brian Clough was always very fond of cricket.
And I was certainly grateful for a sturdy raincoat when I was crouching at the side of the pitch during that service. And on the pitch was a specially constructed stage. Now, one of the people who had a key role on that stormy night, with all the thunder and lightning, was Nicholas Henshaw, who was then a priest at Derby Cathedral. He led the service, accompanied by his colleague Elaine Jones. I spoke to Nicholas on a previous green jumper and said that with the awful weather, he must have been pleased it was a covered stage.
Well, sort of, except it didn't really work because we had the choir there, we had various clergy, and of course it was the stage set for the family and for Jeff Boycott to do their tributes and so forth.
Yes.
And what I suppose we'd underestimated was why we shouldn't have had cushioned chairs there. Because although it was covered, it was not entirely a tent, it was a roof. And so when we actually sat down, well, you can imagine what happened, because the seats were they were like sponges.
Yes.
My memory was, and we wore our best robes, of course, and so they got completely soaking, but the great dry cleaning afterwards was a great blessing.
Well, you coped admirably, I must say. I didn't know that, but I remember you beginning the service by saying Brian always liked the pitch to get a good soaking, and here's a snippet of your introduction that night. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it.
And when the thunder roared, was it God or was it Brian? An enormously warm welcome to this celebration of the life of Brian Clough. As you know, originally this started life as a service in Derby Cathedral. Within 48 hours of that plan hatching, a service on neutral ground where several thousand could take part, it became clear that the scale of this event would be something quite different. The keynote of this is the gathering of people from so many different parts of Brian's life, famous and very ordinary together, to celebrate a person whose profile in the East Midlands was second to none, and whose reputation as a human being was truly international.
Does that bring back some memories?
It really does. Gosh, I still sound the same. That's quite good, isn't it, all these years?
It is, isn't it? Yes. It really was a memorial service like no other, though, wasn't it?
Well, I think it was an extraordinary experience from the very outset. And of course, his funeral had already taken place, which, very quietly with the family. And I remember the first meeting with the family. How do we do a memorial service? How's it going to go? And then you realise it was going to get bigger and bigger. And we had a meeting with all our comms people and all our logistical people. And then, of course, the police showed up in a good way. And they said, actually, the capacity of Derby Cathedral, we cannot guarantee people's safety. And actually, that was actually a really important moment. I don't mean just because of the scale of the event, but I think one of the issues for the Clough family was that how do you ever reconcile Nottingham Forest and Derby County?
Yes.
The running issue through all this. And so we thought, well, at least the cathedral's neutral, but it is Derby Cathedral, so it's got the name there, hasn't it? But when we moved it to Pride Park, of course, the Nottingham Forest supporters said, oh, that's fine, because it wasn't, it's the cathedral at Pride Park. And I think that's what we put actually on the service order. And I think that really helped heal. It wasn't simply that Brian Clough Way then became the main road again. So even that birth, if you like, of the service was extraordinary, like the man himself. But gosh, the service was something else. But as you say, the weather, I mean, if in Derby Cathedral the rain wouldn't have got through the roof. I mean, it was like stair rods coming down from heaven.
Yes.
I don't think. I remember I was doing an interview with Sky Sports or something, and I looked out into the stadium. I thought, we're not going out into that, are we? I mean, it was it's some of the worst weather I've ever experienced in Derby or anywhere else. Extraordinary. A sign of the power of the man, maybe.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, Barbara said in the service, didn't she, that maybe it was Brian telling everyone he didn't want any fuss. But I remember I was reporting outside the ground with a radio car with a huge mast on it, and there was thunder and lightning, and I knew at that point the mast had to come down for safety. It really was quite a night. And the Cathedral choir, that they really coped brilliantly, I thought, with the weather conditions especially. And there's a little clip here I've got that we can just remind ourselves. The famous football hymn, of course, Abide With Me. That they did really well, considering, as you say, that they must have been soaked to the skin.
The amplification was good. That makes all the difference.
Yes.
I mean, soaked to the skin, quite small children, some of them, on a vast field, the biggest arena they'd probably ever been in. And, they did. And I think that's, again, I say this, I run a cathedral now down here in Essex. I think one of the things about cathedrals is you're constantly delivering professionally, and therefore we're good at, we should be, you can rely on us to deliver, I suppose. So that night I had no questions about my director of music or the other musicians or the choir boys. I knew that they deliver. And again, I think that's part of what builds the confidence, doesn't it? We're here not to be overawed by a great occasion, but to serve a great occasion and to serve the memorialisation of an extraordinary man.
There were lots of different tributes that night that were said on the stage. Were there any that stood out for you, looking back?
The two that really stood out for me were Nigel's and Jeff Boycott's. We got to know Nigel a bit during the preparations, and I thought it was a beautiful tribute by a son to a father, and it was beautifully normal, I suppose would be the way of putting it. It was nervous, it was concerned, it was a grieving son, and I found that very moving. I think the Jeff Boycott one, and whatever one makes of Jeff Boycott, it was a supreme performance. It was really quite scary. But it's really quite scary being that near him, with that hat on, standing there delivering this kind of very powerful talk. And I was thinking, oh, yes, this is quite interesting. So those were two that very much stood out. And of course, Barbara herself came on stage at one point, and that was very beautiful.
That's right. And you're talking about Jeff Boycott there. And yes, he was a very imposing figure with that big hat on. He said that people thought that Brian was brash and outspoken, but those that thought that didn't know him really well. He said he was a warm and generous person with a heart of gold. And he recalled a day when Brian used his man management skills to give him a boost.
I remember one day he came to watch me at Chesterfield. It was a gorgeous sunny day. Lovely batting pitch, and I got myself out. I was so upset, I stayed in the dressing room. I was very disappointed and downhearted. And after about an hour, he came into the dressing room. He said, I know you're down. He said, but look at them outside, your teammates. They aren't sure if they'll ever make runs. He said, you'll make runs, if not today, tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, the day after. He said, you've got talent, young man. And he made me feel 10 feet tall, and yet I'd failed. And I always felt that was his real strength. He was a genius at man management.
A real insight into the relationship there between Brian and Jeff Boycott.
Absolutely. And I guess that was a theme of the evening, wasn't it? was that this was not just some well-known person in the life of football. This was somebody for whom those relationships, those friendships, and sometimes the opposite, of course, but the way in which he'd actually, and that seemed to be a key in what so many people spoke about in how he'd managed footballers. It actually wasn't about telling them what to do. It was showing them by example, inviting them into relationship, and that sense of friendship was really crucial. Yeah.
And what's your lasting memory of that particular night?
My lasting memory, and I don't know if it was ever caught on film properly, was as we processed out,
yes,
there was a mini Mexican wave through the crowd.
Ah, wonderful.
And I thought, this is never going to happen again. At the end of a service, however great, I'm not going to get a Mexican wave again.
No.
And I thought again, that really summed it up. If we'd been in a cathedral, that wouldn't have happened. If it had been a solemn occasion, that wouldn't have happened. And if we hadn't got the crowd on our side, that wouldn't have happened. But instead, that felt like all of us together saying something really important about what we were celebrating, that we could do that so freely.
And the full interview with Nicholas Henshaw, along with more tributes on the night, is in episode number 21, called Thunder Roared.
He was provocative and fascinating, but he had a clear picture of the way he wanted his teams to play football, which was on the floor, passing the ball with great defence. His teams often won the Fair Play League, and yet they still won trophies. And it wasn't luck that brought his teams success and himself success. It was a unique style of management that we had never seen before.
You can also see more tributes and read about more memories on the tribute website, brianclough.com. I'm Marcus Alton, the editor of the site, and I'll look forward to speaking to you again soon and sharing more memories about the great man in the green jumper.